Jack squatted in his backyard, fiddling with the stubborn blade of his ancient lawnmower. Sweat trickled down his temple as he muttered to himself. Should have replaced this thing 5 years ago, he grumbled. The sun blazed overhead, and the faint buzz of cicadas only added to the monotony. This was the highlight of his Saturday, a battle against rusted machinery and his own procrastination. As if on cue, a deafening crash shattered the quiet suburban afternoon. Jack jolted upright, nearly losing his grip on the wrench. He scanned the yard, squinting against the glare, only to see smoke curling ominously from behind the old oak tree. What the hell, he muttered, tossing the wrench aside. His heart pounded as he trudged toward the source of the chaos. Was it a downed drone? A meteorite? His neighbor's terrible DIY fireworks again? As he rounded the tree, the sight before him left him speechless. In the middle of his yard sat a sleek, metallic pod, half buried in the dirt. The thing hissed and clicked, expelling steam like a deranged tea kettle. Before Jack could process what he was looking at, the hatch slid open with a mechanical whir. A figure stepped out. She, because there was no mistaking the curves, despite her otherworldly appearance, stood tall and radiant, her shimmering silver skin catching the sunlight in a way that made her glow. Her hair floated around her head like it had a life of its own, shifting colors with every slight movement. She wore something that looked like liquid metal molded into a jumpsuit, tight in all the wrong, or right, places. Jack blinked. Nope. I've officially lost it. The alien's gaze locked onto him, her iridescent eyes narrowing. She raised an elegant hand, and a strange device extended from her wrist, emitting a series of beeps. Then she spoke, her voice smooth yet oddly mechanical, thanks to a glitchy translator strapped to her chest. You, she said, pointing at Jack, are emitting sufficient heat vibrations for optimal repair. Jack took a step back, hands raised. Lady, I don't know what you're selling, but... You must assist me, she interrupted, striding toward him. My vessel is incapacitated. I require immediate access to your energy rod. My what? Jack blurted, stumbling over a tree root. Her translator buzzed again. Correction, your power source. The one you use to ignite your tools of combustion. Jack froze, his brain struggling to catch up. Wait. You mean my generator? If that is what you Earthlings call it, yes, she said, crossing her arms. Earthlings? Generator? Jack ran a hand through his hair, trying to piece together the absurdity of the situation. Look, I don't know who you are or why you're here, but I'm pretty sure there's a perfectly good alien embassy somewhere in DFC, why don't you? I am not here on diplomatic matters, she said, cutting him off. This location was unintentional. Jack snorted. Unintentional? You crash-landed in my backyard, lady. That's the definition of unintentional. She tilted her head, the motion strangely bird-like. I was attempting to recalibrate my trajectory. Your primitive gravitational field is deceptively strong. Yeah, Earth tends to do that, Jack muttered. The alien stepped closer, studying him with an intensity that made his skin crawl. Wait. Your facial structure, she frowned, or at least Jack thought it was a frown. It is familiar. Jack's eyebrows shot up. I'm sorry, what? She leaned in, her glowing eyes scanning his face. Do you not recognize me, human? No, because I've never met. I am Zanara, she declared, straightening up. Your childhood neighbor. Jack blinked. What? Approximately 2 decades ago, my family inhabited this region for observational purposes. We integrated among your kind to study your cultural habits. Jack stared at her, slack-jawed. You're telling me you're the kid who lived down the street? The one with the weird pet ferret thing? Zanara nodded solemnly. It was not a ferret. It was a juvenile Plaxonian grazer. Of course it was, Jack said, rubbing his temples. And you just left one day. No explanation. Our mission ended, she said simply. But I retained fond memories of our time here. Jack let out a disbelieving laugh. Fond memories? You're talking about a time when you were undercover as a human, and now you're crashing back into my life, literally, because your spaceship broke down? That is an accurate summary, Zanara said, unfazed. Jack threw up his hands. Great. Just great. Why not? Sure. Let's fix your alien spaceship while we're at it. What's the worst that could happen? Zanara's lips curved into what Jack assumed was a smile. Excellent. Your cooperation will expedite the process.
Yeah.
Sure, Jack muttered, trudging back toward his shed. But if you're lying about being my neighbor, I swear I'm calling the cops. I assure you, human, Zanara called after him, her tone far too chipper, I have no reason to deceive you. You are far too amusing to lose. Jack groaned. This was going to be a long day. Jack set down his toolbox with a loud clank, staring at the mess that was Zanara's spacecraft. The metallic hull shimmered in the sunlight, scorched in places, and covered in symbols he couldn't begin to decipher. He tapped the side of the ship. So, where's the engine on this thing? Or do you just wave your hands and it flies? Zanara crouched beside him, her glowing hair brushing his arm as she gestured to a panel. This compartment houses the propulsion core. It is malfunctioning due to atmospheric interference and suboptimal vibrational harmony. Jack blinked. Right. Vibrational harmony. Sure. Let me grab my harmonic wrench from the shed. She frowned. You possess such a tool? That was sarcasm, Jack muttered, opening the panel. Inside, the guts of the ship looked like a cross between a circuit board and an art installation. He groaned. Okay, you're going to have to translate this alien tech into something I understand. Otherwise, I'm just guessing. Zanara tilted her head, then reached into the ship, pulling out a tool that resembled a neon spider. This is a molecular recalibrator. Use it to realign the damaged conduits. Jack took the device cautiously. It buzzed in his hand, glowing faintly. Molecular recalibrator, huh? Looks more like a bug zapper. It does not zap bugs, Zanara said, confused. Never mind, Jack muttered. He adjusted the device, pressing it against the conduit she pointed out. A spark shot out, making him jump. Whoa. Is this thing supposed to shock me? Your bioelectric field is interfering with its function. Perhaps I should handle it. Nope. I've got this, Jack said stubbornly. He resumed working, muttering under his breath. Bioelectric field, vibrational harmony, aliens with fancy tech and no user manual. Zanara observed him closely, her expression oddly soft. You exhibit remarkable adaptability for someone of your species. Thanks, I guess, Jack said, focusing on the task. Although I'm starting to think your species isn't much better if you can't even fix your own ship without crashing into a backyard. Zanara's lips twitched, almost a smile. Your bluntness is refreshing. Glad I can be your comic relief, Jack replied, wiping sweat from his brow. As they worked, Zanara's curiosity about Earth began to surface. She picked up a roll of duct tape from Jack's toolbox, turning it over in her hands. What is the purpose of this adhesive spool? Jack glanced over. That? It's duct tape. Fixes everything. Broken pipes, ripped clothes, you name it. Zanara's eyes widened. A universal repair agent? Fascinating. She tore off a piece and stuck it to her arm, marveling at how it adhered. Your technology, while primitive, is remarkably versatile.
Yeah.
Well, we make do with what we've got, Jack said, grinning despite himself. Their progress was slow but steady until Zanara suggested a recalibration ritual. She stood in front of the ship, holding a glowing orb in one hand and a thin rod in the other. What's this supposed to do? Jack asked skeptically. This ritual synchronizes the energy fields between my vessel and its surroundings, Zanara explained, her tone reverent. Jack crossed his arms. And what am I supposed to do? You must join me, she said, extending the rod toward him. Jack eyed it warily. This isn't going to zap me, is it? It is harmless, Zanara assured him. Simply follow my movements. What followed was less of a ritual and more of an alien interpretive dance. Zanara twirled and waved the rod in intricate patterns, humming a melody that sounded like a mix between a lullaby and a cat purring. Jack tried to imitate her, feeling ridiculous as he stumbled through the motions. You're making this up, he said, tripping over his own feet. I am not, Zanara said, stifling a laugh. Your form, however, requires refinement. Gee, thanks, Jack muttered. After several failed attempts, Zanara declared the ritual complete. She inspected the ship's readings, nodding in satisfaction. The recalibration is proceeding. Your assistance has been invaluable. Glad to hear it, Jack said, leaning against the ship. Now, can we get back to using actual tools? I'm more of a wrench and screwdriver guy than a dancing with sticks guy. Zanara chuckled softly, a sound Jack found strangely pleasant. Your practicality is admirable.
Yeah.
Well, somebody's got to keep things grounded, Jack replied. As they resumed repairs, Zanara shared snippets of her homeworld. She described towering crystalline cities, oceans of liquid light, and skies filled with moons that changed color. Jack listened, fascinated despite himself. It sounds beautiful, he admitted. It is, Zanara said, her voice tinged with longing. But it lacks the unpredictability of Earth. Your species thrives on chaos in a way that is both baffling and inspiring. Jack smirked. Chaos is kind of our thing. Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden explosion. A burst of smoke erupted from the ship, making both of them jump back. What the hell was that? Jack coughed, waving the smoke away. A minor setback, Zanara said, inspecting the damage. The flux capacitor has overloaded. Jack groaned. Please tell me you've got a spare. Zanara hesitated. I do not. Of course you don't, Jack muttered. Because why would anything about this be easy? Zanara placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch surprisingly warm. Do not lose hope, human. Together, we will overcome this obstacle. Jack sighed, glancing at the smoldering ship.
Yeah.
I'm sure we will. Just as soon as I figure out what the hell a flux capacitor is. Jack wiped the soot off his face as Zanara fiddled with her translator. It emitted a high-pitched whine, then clicked back to life. She tilted her head at him. I detect elevated frustration levels in your tone. Is this typical of Earthlings under pressure? You could say that, Jack muttered, crouching to examine the damaged core of the ship. Especially when their Saturday plans get hijacked by an alien crash and a flux capacitor that sounds like something out of a bad sci-fi movie. Zanara nodded thoughtfully. Your species seems to channel stress into vocal complaints. An interesting coping mechanism. Glad you're finding my bad mood educational, Jack said dryly. Their conversation was cut short by the unmistakable sound of someone approaching. Jack groaned, already knowing who it would be. Sure enough, his neighbor, Mrs. Miller, popped her head around the fence, her curiosity written all over her face. Jack, she called out, squinting at the scene. What's going on back here? I heard a loud bang, and I saw smoke. Jack straightened, forcing a smile. Hey, Mrs. Miller. Just, working on a project. Mrs. Miller's eyes zeroed in on Zanara, who was now attempting to appear inconspicuous by holding a wrench awkwardly. The effect was ruined by her shimmering, alien appearance. Oh my goodness, Mrs. Miller gasped, clutching her pearls. Who's this? This is Zanara, Jack said, stumbling over his words. She's visiting from out of town. Zanara stepped forward, her translator clicking. Greetings. Your carbon-based form radiates an intriguing vibrational frequency. Mrs. Miller blinked, clearly unsure how to respond. Well, thank you? Jack cleared his throat, stepping between them. She's a bit of a science enthusiast. Doesn't get out much. Mrs. Miller nodded slowly, though her suspicion was evident. I see. And what exactly are you two working on? Just fixing up an old machine, Jack said quickly. Mrs. Miller's gaze drifted to the spaceship, her brows furrowing. That doesn't look like any machine I've ever seen. Is that some kind of experimental technology? Zanara interjected, her translator glitching slightly. It is a vehicular unit. Designed for rapid atmospheric traversal and interstellar. Jack cut her off with a loud cough. It's a prototype.
Yeah.
A prototype. Still working out the kinks. Mrs. Miller tilted her head, unconvinced. Well, it's certainly unique. Zanara took a step closer, misinterpreting the silence as an invitation for further explanation. Your interest in this vessel is commendable. Would you like to observe its internal mechanisms? They are quite stimulating. Jack's eyes widened as Mrs. Miller's cheeks flushed. No. No internal mechanisms. It's classified. You know, top secret. Oh, Mrs. Miller said, clearly flustered. Well, I wouldn't want to intrude. Great, Jack said, steering her gently back toward the fence. Thanks for checking in, though. Before Mrs. Miller could protest, he ushered her away, ignoring her muttered questions about government projects and safety protocols. As soon as she was gone, Jack turned to Zanara, who seemed genuinely perplexed. What part of blend in do you not understand? I was merely attempting to establish rapport, Zanara said. Was my approach ineffective? Let's just say Mrs. Miller probably thinks I'm running some kind of alien conspiracy now, Jack replied, rubbing his temples. Zanara tilted her head. But I am an alien. And this is your backyard. Therefore, it is not a conspiracy, it is a factual occurrence. Jack stared at her, then sighed.
Yeah.
Try explaining that to Mrs. Miller. They returned to the ship, resuming their work in tense silence. Zanara handed Jack a glowing tool, and he used it to tighten a loose component. You know, Jack said after a while, this whole situation could have gone a lot smoother if you'd landed, I don't know, anywhere but here. Would you have preferred I crashed into a more populated area? Zanara asked, raising an eyebrow. Jack thought about it, then shook his head. No. That would have been worse. The government would have been all over you. Then you see why your property was a logical choice, Zanara said, her tone matter-of-fact. Jack couldn't argue with that, though he wasn't thrilled about it. As he tightened another bolt, he glanced at Zanara. So, what happens when you leave? Are you just going to erase my memory or something? Zanara looked genuinely offended. Of course not. That would be an egregious violation of interspecies ethics. Good to know you've got ethics, Jack muttered. Their banter was interrupted by a soft hum. Jack glanced at the ship's console, which was now glowing steadily. Hey, is that a good sign? Zanara nodded, a rare smile gracing her lips. The core is stabilizing. We are making progress. Jack leaned back, feeling a small sense of accomplishment. Well, that's something. Before he could celebrate further, the ground shook slightly, and a low, ominous rumble filled the air. Jack froze. What now? Zanara's expression darkened. We are not alone. The rumble grew louder, shaking the tools on the ground. Jack stumbled, grabbing onto the edge of the ship. What do you mean, we're not alone? Zanara's glowing eyes scanned the sky, narrowing as a shadow passed over them. A tracker. Likely sent to retrieve me, or eliminate me. My departure has been unauthorized. Jack's mouth fell open. You didn't think to mention that earlier? There was no indication they would find me so quickly, she replied, her voice calm but firm. The shadow descended rapidly, revealing a sleek black craft. It hovered ominously above the yard, its surface rippling like liquid metal. With a loud hiss, a hatch opened, and a figure stepped out. The alien was larger than Zanara, armored, and carrying a weapon that hummed with energy. Zanara, the figure boomed. You are in violation of the accord. Surrender immediately. Zanara squared her shoulders, stepping in front of Jack. I refuse to comply. My actions have not jeopardized the Accord's principles. The figure raised its weapon. Your presence here is unauthorized. Compliance is non-negotiable. Jack, still half hidden behind Zanara, muttered, Great. Now I'm caught in the middle of an alien standoff. Just what I needed today. Zanara glanced back at him. Human, I will require your assistance. Distract him while I stabilize my ship's systems. Distract him? Jack hissed. With what? A lawn chair? Improvise, she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. Jack groaned but grabbed the nearest object, a garden hose. As the alien advanced, he flicked the nozzle, sending a high-powered stream of water straight at the intruder's face. The alien stumbled, momentarily disoriented. What is this? It roared, swiping at the water. Earth's deadliest weapon, Jack said sarcastically, spraying again. You better run. Zanara, meanwhile, had darted back to the ship, her fingers flying across the console. The ship began to hum, its lights flickering back to life. The alien recovered quickly, raising its weapon again. Jack cursed under his breath, grabbing a nearby rake and swinging it like a makeshift sword. The alien batted it away with ease, sending Jack sprawling. Zanara's voice cut through the chaos. Human. Keep him occupied a little longer. Working on it. Jack shouted, scrambling to his feet. He grabbed a bag of fertilizer, hurling it at the alien. It exploded in a cloud of dust, coating the intruder in a fine white powder. The alien froze, coughing and blinking. What is this substance? Jack grinned. Organic chaos. Hope you're not allergic. Zanara's ship roared to life, its engines flaring. She stepped out, holding a small, glowing sphere. Stand down, Kaltar. You cannot outmatch my vessel. Kaltar hesitated, his weapon lowering slightly. You risk much for a primitive species. Why? Zanara's gaze flicked to Jack, then back to Kaltar. Because their adaptability and ingenuity surpass our own. They are not as primitive as you believe. Jack raised an eyebrow. I think that was a compliment? Before Kaltar could respond, Zanara tossed the glowing sphere at his feet. It detonated in a flash of light, sending him reeling. She grabbed Jack's arm, pulling him toward the ship. We must leave, she said urgently. Leave? Jack sputtered. I thought you just needed to fix your ship. Plans change, Zanara replied, dragging him inside. The ship's interior was surprisingly spacious, filled with glowing panels and sleek surfaces. Jack barely had time to buckle into a seat before the ship shot into the sky, leaving Kaltar behind. As they ascended, Jack looked out the window, watching his backyard shrink below. Well, there goes my quiet weekend. Zanara glanced at him, a small smile playing on her lips. You handled yourself admirably, human.
Yeah.
Sure, Jack said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. I'll add Alien Combat Distraction Specialist to my resume. She laughed softly, the sound surprisingly warm. Your resourcefulness is what allowed us to escape. I underestimated you. Jack leaned back, trying to process everything that had just happened. So, what now? Are you dropping me off somewhere, or am I stuck on this intergalactic joyride? Zanara's expression grew thoughtful. You have proven to be a valuable ally. Perhaps there is a place for you among my people. Jack snorted.
Yeah.
I'll fit right in with the glowing aliens who think duct tape is cutting-edge technology. She tilted her head. Your humor is refreshing. Jack shook his head, a reluctant smile tugging at his lips. You've got a weird way of giving compliments, you know that? As the ship entered the atmosphere of a distant planet, Zanara turned to him. Prepare yourself, human. You are about to witness something extraordinary. Jack stared out the window, his jaw dropping as a sprawling alien city came into view. Towers of light and crystal stretched into the sky, and the air shimmered with hues he couldn't name. Well, he muttered, I guess this beats mowing the lawn. Zanara's laughter filled the cabin as the ship descended, marking the start of a new chapter neither of them could have anticipated.